So we are going to talk a little bit about arranging, and as such, we'll be talking a little bit about, what is barbershop anyway. You have to know what it is to be able to arrange a barbershop. But I would like this to be hopefully an educational experience for all of you, whether you're interested in arranging or not, so you can learn a little bit more about barbershop harmony. I don't know what the levels are of all of you out there listening and watching. So this is like taking a stab in the dark. I'm just gonna start talking and say some things, and we'll begin with on a basic level and go to where we're doing a little analysis and look at some successful examples of arrangements as time permits. You're welcome to ask questions in the chat. And I've asked Tanya or one of our organizers here to monitor that, and feel free to interrupt me if a burning question arises and somebody needs something clarified or wants to dwell a little bit longer on any particular topic. I'm happy to do that. I want this to be as useful to all of you as it can be. So I will begin, and I'm begin by sharing my screen. So let's see if I can do that successfully. And there you see too much stuff. And so I'm gonna, hopefully you're seeing something that says characterizing features. I'm gonna do something at the top of my screen that may allow me to see at least some faces. Yes, a few of your faces. All right. Now, I should have said a word about myself. I started arranging a long time ago. I've been in barbershop 45 years, but I think I started arranging in my mother's womb. I don't know. I used to sit in church and write arrangements and rearrange the hymns. My mom would give me a little pencil to draw on, and I would, instead of drawing, I would get out the hymn book and rearrange the hymns and get my hand slapped for writing in the book. So when I joined barbershop, it was perfect for me because I loved harmony. Always loved vocal harmony of all types. So this was just my thing. And I started arranging for my own quartet because we wanted stuff to do that not everybody was doing. And I've been doing it for a number of years. Some of you have probably had my arrangements inflicted on you, and happily you live to tell about it. So we'll start from the very beginning. Just with some characterizing features. What is barbershop? So as you see there's some things listed. It is consonant, 4-part harmony. Consonant means the opposite of dissonant, tends to use chords that are not clashing, that are part of the harmonic series, if that means anything to you. It is generally a cappella, not strictly a cappella, but generally it is a cappella. It has what we call solid voicings. I'll elaborate on that a little bit. And not many passing tones, and I'll elaborate on that. It is sung with an ear towards ringing, ring and lock. In fact, lock is a word that barbershoppers love to use. I'm not sure I've heard it used in other singing communities other than barbershop. That means when the voices are just so tightly in tune that you experience the solidity of the chord. Thirdly, the melody is in an inside voice. Second tenor, and by the way, men's and women's barbershop both use the term tenor, lead, baritone, and bass. A second tenor we call the lead, and that's the melody stays inside. That's one of the characteristic features of barbershop. In many kinds of choral music, the melody is on top. In most symphonic music, the melody is carried by woodwinds or strings, and it's on top. In barbershop, it almost always lies in the middle somewhere. So there's a first tenor, or what we just call tenor, harmonizing above. A bass on solid chord tones. That means generally roots and fifths, and I'll talk more about that. And baritone filling it out, taking a part whose voice leading doesn't always have to make a lot of sense, but it fills out the chord and makes 4 parts. And barbershop features embellishments, things like echoes, swipes, back time, bell chords, all kinds of things that adorn the music, because those are the things barbershoppers love to sing, and also gives it musical interest. But it continually converges to what we call homorhythmic chords. That means a chord where everybody's singing the same word sound at the same time. And then fifth thing is just freedom with the song. The roots of barbershop are tied up with those of jazz and blues. And so barbershoppers take songs and mold them in numerous different ways. They may take a song that was intended to be sung in tempo and they sing it totally ad lib, or they may change the melody as long as you can get away with that with the listener. So there's all kinds of things barbershop does with songs. All right, so now let me talk about some things that are special about it. Well, barbershop wants to get a chord for every melody note. In many kinds of music, you don't try that hard to get a chord all the time. There are lots of passing tones. Maybe have three parts that are sustaining on a neutral syllable and another part that's running up and down. Some of the chords go in the chords sustained by the others and some don't. Barbershop tries to get a melody note for each chord. That's very special about barbershop. It goes for a rich variety of consonant chords. There's nothing barbershoppers hate than a song that just dwells on one or two or possibly three chords for the whole song. We want richness and variation. It has these embellishments that I mentioned to go. And even with the embellishments, it has a voice leading that tends to preserve the harmony. So even if there's an embellishment with somebody doing an echo, every note makes some kind of a chord. And then, of course, it loves to use voicing, different voicings like different inversions to create variation in color and musical interest. And then finally, there's just the enjoyment of the harmony, the voicing and embellishment, which is why barbershoppers stand around and sing tags, which I call barbershop songs for the impatient. You don't have to learn a song, but you can learn just a few notes and immediately begin ringing chords. Okay, just to start off, here's some general guidelines for range. This is for male barbershop. Barbershoppers for male barbershop uses the tenor or the male treble clef. It's designated with the little 8 here. And this is the honest bass clef. Women's barbershop uses the honest treble clef and a dishonest bass clef with the 8 here, which means it's transposed up an octave. And I encourage all of you who write arrangements, always use that notation. Don't just use an ordinary treble or bass clef for a women's or men's arrangement, because other musicians will pick it up and they don't know what we're talking about. If you don't have that 8 right there for the male, they'll think it's treble clef. So let's make sure we're clear what we mean. This is a general range you can see for the parts. Tenor generally lies in that range, lead in that range, baritone in that range, bass in that range. Well, is that always true? Well, no. Those of you who are arrangers are probably grinning because we don't really abide by those. It depends on who we're arranging for. If the lead can sing much higher than that F, you put them up there. I do it all the time, but these are just general guidelines. For women's barbershop, it goes like this, like G to F, A to C, A to C, here E flat to D. And now you notice the women's are a bit squished in. So these tend to lie, the men's about a fifth below the women's, but not strictly. So you notice there's a wide range here in the bass, but this low end actually is a minor 7th above that one. So it's a bit more squished in. So generally women's barbershop just doesn't utilize quite as much range. And I say generally, because that's not universally true at all. So if you want to look at an arrangement and how men's and women's compare, here's an example. This is a well-known arrangement done by a well-known arranger, the late, great Renee Craig, who was a Sweet Adeline in the United States. This is her famous or well-known, often sung arrangement of May I Never Love Again. So you see how the tessitura lies here. You see that there's the female bass clef there. And what happens when that gets transposed to men? Well, it goes from B flat up, down. It looks like up, but it's down because this is the male treble clef. It goes from B flat down to E flat. So it's down a fifth. And roughly that is the typical interval of transposition between men's and women's barbershop. So here's another example. And this one I have sound bites. This is one of my old arrangements from, you can see when it was created back in 1990, so back in the Paleolithic age. And this was, sung a lot. So here it is in a women's key, and that was written in F sharp, pretty ugly key, but I tend to write things where I think they go, not where it looks pretty. And with men, it transposed down to B natural. So I think I can hear sound bites of these. So you'll hear the women's version and the men's version, and you'll see all kinds of typical barbershop things. Here's a little embellishment, that little bass echo. Here's a swipe right here. Here's a bass lead in, okay, with everybody else singing a phantom, having the phantom beat. Big swipe here. This voicing right here is called Chinese seventh. So there's just all kinds of barbershop isms in this. So here we go.
One look in those eyes, your great big gorgeous eyes. Then all the birds were singing, and the bells were ringing. Oh, baby, don't you realize?
All right, same thing, sung in the male range.
One look in those eyes, your great big gorgeous eyes. Then all the birds were singing, and the bells were ringing. Oh, baby, don't you realize?
And this is one of those cases where a perfect transposition works. If the arrangement is fairly tight, it'll work in men's and women's range by simple transposition. If you've got a musical software, notation software, you can do it in the blink of an eye. Okay, so you see how the tessitura lines up. Everybody barbershop arranger needs to get comfortable with the general tessitura of men's and women's barbershop. And of course, nowadays we have a lot of mixed barbershop, and I'll talk about that coming up here. So what voicings work a little better for one gender than the other? Well, generally tighter voicings are a little better for women. So you see here, I'm going to talk about chords. That's just a B flat major chord right there. What's called 1-3-5-8, works great for women. Here's a seventh chord, same chord except a seventh. That's a dominant seventh chord, if you want to call it that. Here's a, by the way, this is a mistake here. That B should be a B flat right there on top. So this is that same seventh chord as this one, except with the third on the bottom. This is what we call first inversion. I'll get to that later. If this is all gibberish to you, just hang in there and be patient. But that first inversion thing works better for women than for men. Here's what we call the third inversion. This is a D7 chord with a seventh, which is a C in the bass. And here's a tight sixth chord. It just works a little better for women than for men. For men, spread out things a little bit. You know, here's what a C chord, major chord, and what we call the 10th voicing, root, third, fifth, root, and third. This is what we call the divorced tenor. Divorced tenor means the tenor is more than an octave above the lead's melody. Whoops, what did I do there? That keeps happening. I find that when I'm using PowerPoint with Zoom, I get a lot of unsolicited movement of the slides, so you may have to put up with that. So anyway, here's that divorced tenor. Here's what we call the Chinese seventh. That's a G7, the root's on top, and it's kind of spread out over an octave and a half. The fifth, the D is on the bottom. Here we got a very open chord. It's a C chord, but there's the C, there's the third, doubled fifth, so it's spread out over 2 octaves. And this is what we call divorced bass. Now, divorced bass means something other or non-analogous to divorced tenor. Divorced tenor means the tenor is more than an octave above the lead. Divorced bass means the bass is more than an octave above the next lowest part. So there you have that F chord with the bass down on that instead of up here where you might say the bass ordinarily would be. So, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself, but I want to just give you a little clue about the differences between the genders. Okay, let's talk just a moment about mixed. Well, with mixed barbershop, you have to know what you're talking about. What do you mean mixed? There's different ways a quartet or a chorus can be mixed, right? If it's a quartet, you could have 3 women and 1 man. And quite frequently when that happens, the man, obviously the man's probably singing bass, although I've seen some exceptions to that. And usually that just sings in the women's range. The bass, the women's bass part is in the man's baritone range, and it works fine. Three men, one woman, exactly the opposite. That female tenor part or male tenor part is right in the woman's alto range. So you usually sing in the male tessitura, the male range. Two women, two men. Well, there's where you have the crossover problem, because you've got probably lead and tenor. One of them's lead, one of them's male, and one of them's female. So they're crossing over each other. And part of the time, the woman is singing below the man. So there, the challenge can be balanced. So it takes special voices to sing that kind of mixed ensemble. But you might choose, if the first case, the man on the lead, you might choose an arrangement where the baritone is more often above the lead, which happens. In the second case, woman on lead, the opposite. And a rule of thumb for key selection, you can take a men's arrangement and move it up about a minor third, or move a women's arrangement down about a minor third, and quite frequently it will work just fine for the mixed ensemble. And when I say about, I mean about, because for different voices, different things can work. All right, now let me see if I can escape that now and bring up something else. I want to talk a little bit about chord vocabulary. And to do that, I have to find the right thing over here. This is a textbook. I teach a university course in mathematics and music. And if anybody wants it, I'll give you the PDF. I can even put it in the chat if anybody wants it, although you'll have a lot of stuff that you may not wish to read. But here's some stuff that's pertinent to our discussion. What chords do you sing in barbershop? Well, obviously the major chord. What's a major chord? It's got a root, a third, which is a major third above the root, a fifth, which is a minor third above that. So that C, E, G, basic chord in all of music, that's the major chord, or sometimes say major triad. We use triad for a chord that has 3 note classes in it. It's still a triad if you put a C up there and double the root, because there's still 3 note classes. All right, here's another one. You see a key of B flat, but it's an F chord. So that F, A, C is a major chord. Here we're in the key of E, but we have an F sharp chord, F sharp, A sharp, and C sharp. That requires an accidental to affect that major chord. There's more major chords, some spread out. The root doesn't have to be on the bottom. There's that F major chord, F sharp major chord with the root double below. So I won't bore you too much with that. So you have major chord, and then you have the minor chord. Same thing. So there's the F, but instead of A, you have A flat. So you have a minor third from the root to the third, and a major third interval from its third to its fifth. Now, like I say, if anybody wants to belabor this, put it in the chat, and Tanya has promised to interrupt me and just say any questions. I mean, here's another one. Here we're in the key of E flat, but this is a C minor chord. It doesn't require any accidentals, because for those of you like music theory, E flat is the same as C minor, and I won't go into that because it would probably just entirely ruin your day. Here we have F sharp, but now it's F sharp minor, so it doesn't have the A sharp in it. It has F sharp, A natural, and C sharp, and the C sharp double below. So major and minor triads, those are fundamental to all music. Barbershopper uses them. Barbershop, now in the line of triads, barbershop also uses the diminished and augmented triad. Here's diminished, minor third from the B to the D, minor third from the D to the F. 2 minor thirds. Here's the augmented. It's 2 major thirds, C to E, E to G sharp. Those 2 chords are used mostly in passing situations in barbershop, just like they're used in passing situations in most music. By the way, I'm going to make this a little bigger. I realize that my screen is huge. It looks huge to me, but it doesn't look huge to you. I know that. 7th chord. This is very fundamental in barbershop, to the point that barbershop even confiscates it and calls it a barbershop 7th. That's really a misnomer, because it's everybody's 7th chord. Root, 3rd, 5th. So the bottom of the 3 make a major triad. And here we have the minor 7th, so the flatted B. So that has the same major triad, but a minor third above the G is the B flat. If you want to tune it correctly, it's not a true minor third. In fact, if you want to tune it correctly, none of these intervals are proper, but I'm not going to bore you with that. Here's another seventh chord. It's in the key of G, but it's a D seventh, so it's what we call the dominant, actual dominant chord. Here's another one. So I'm going to slide past that. Minor seventh chord, same principle. You take the minor chord. Here's a D minor, D, F, A. That makes a D minor chord. Put a C on top. So that's a minor seventh on a minor chord. And so that's the minor seventh, used a lot in barbershop. There's two more examples of it there. And by the way, if anybody wants this, I can put it in the chat. Major seventh chord, used passing in barbershop. It's considered somewhat dissonant. So here's the F with the major seventh, not the E flat, but the E natural. Here's another one. This is A flat major seventh, and so on. Sometimes called the full diminished, the diminished seventh. So it takes that B, D, F thing and adds an A flat on top. And now you notice that this one has a special property. Actually, that's also a property of the augmented triad. I should have said that. In that it doesn't have a distinguishable root. If I take this B and put it on top, you have the same sequence of intervals, minor third, minor third, minor third, minor third. I like to call that the soap opera chord because they always play that on soap operas when there's some tense moment, usually on an organ. Now, here's something's really special to barbershop. It's called the half diminished. So what do I mean by half diminished? Well, you've got, first of all, a minor triad, except that the fifth is flatted, D, F, A flat, and a normal minor seventh, as if it were a dominant seventh chord. So it differs from the dominant seventh chord in that its third is flatted, its fifth is flatted, but the seventh remains intact. That's why it's, I guess, why it's called half diminished. I've never really understood that term, to tell you the honest truth. Now, one thing about this one, there's various ways you could view it. If I took the D and put it on top, it might look like something we would call a minor sixth, because you've got the minor triad, F, A flat, and C, with a D, which is a sixth. So you might call it a minor sixth. The other thing you can do is imagine that there was a B flat in there, and then it becomes a B flat ninth, because it's got B flat, its third is a D, its fifth is an F, its seventh is an A flat, and its ninth is a C. Now, the problem with the ninth chord is it has 5 chord tones. So barbershop can't use 5 chord tones without some sort of very talented person singing 2 notes. And so quite often that ninth chord is incomplete in barbershop. And what you omit typically in that is the root. And so if I took that, and especially if I put the D on top, so that it was F, A flat, C, and D, quite often that would function as a seventh chord or as a dominant ninth chord. So if those of you might have had the music theory from just a little while ago, probably learned all about that. I won't belabor it too much unless somebody wants. Barbershoppers like to, especially arrangers, like to label chords. We like to label chords first by naming them by the root. So if the root's a D, you call it a D chord. If it's a D minor, you might put an M beside it. Generally, we like to label things though according to where they are in the key. So if it's rooted on scale tone 3, we might write a Roman numeral 3. So one system is if it's a triad, there's no suffix to the letter or numeral. If it's minor, you put an M beside it. If it's augmented, you write AUG or a plus. If diminished, you write DIM or 0. Seventh, just write a seventh superscript. Minor seventh, M7 superscript, major seventh, capital M7 superscript, diminished seventh, the 07 superscript, and the half diminished seventh, the 0 with a slash through it, 7. Now, there's different, musicians have different conventions, so it depends on what religion you are. If you're Presbyterian, you use this system. However, if you're Methodist, you use the system where instead of using the small m, you just use a small numeral rather than a capital numeral 3. You use a small Roman numeral for all the chords that have minor thirds. I like to be consistent. Maybe it's because I'm a mathematician. If I use that lower numeral one, then I would want to use lowercase letters for when I'm labeling them by the note class, which almost nobody does. So that's why I tend to not like that system, but that's just me. So here's something labeled. Here's your D minor chord, D with an M, or a lowercase d. E7, there it is, E, G sharp, B, D, written like that. C augmented, B flat minor 7, or if you use the other system, small B flat without and suppress the M. Here, according to note class, here we're in the key of G. This says 5, which means what? It should be a D chord. Well, there it is. D, there's the 5th. Okay. There's the 3rd. There's the root. I'm sorry. There's a 5th, and there's a 3rd down below, F sharp. So it's in what we call the first inversion, thirds on the bottom. All right.
David,
So, yes.
one of our questions here is, how do you label an inversion of a chord?
Yeah, so our music theory people can do that, and that's a whole topic of discussion. But there's various ways of doing that. One is to use little notations like 6/4, which generally means the second inversion. That means the distance from the 5th up to the root is 6/4. Okay, so that's a great question, and I probably should not dwell on that too much, because actually in Barbershop we don't do it very much. We just write the label and think of it that way. But that's an excellent question, and some of our music theory people should take that on and make that clear to everybody. Because and I should say that chord labeling and inversion labeling I find to be very non-standard in music. You know, there's no different people have different methods. So thank you for that. I will go on unless somebody has another burning question about this. And let's talk about taking a song and just harmonizing it using this chord vocabulary. So I'm going to suppress that. Let me get into this, and I'm going to pull out. If you were an arranger, you would start with a song. Songs are published in a format that looks like this. Here's a good old song. It's been Barbershop before. Some of you may be familiar with it. It's written by Irving Berlin. I'm going to blow it up so you can see it better. And it's called When I Lost You. It's also public domain, so there's no problem if you look at that copyright, and you can read Roman numerals, 1912. So I think we're safe. And it starts off with a piano intro. There's the melody line. You can kind of look at the chords. If you were an arranger, you might say, well, I might want to use those chords. And you would say, well, what's the primary harmony? Well, let's skip the verse and let's go down to the chorus. Suppose I were just to harmonize that chorus. So there it is. That's a perfect key if you were in the male range. And you see that basically these notes play that C major triad. So I would say the primary harmony of that is C. And the same for the second measure. And now I look at the third measure and I say, well, it's got a B natural there. It's got an F sharp, it's got an E flat in the bass. Those form a B7, B triad. But then look at that. There's this dissonant tone right there. Got a C. That doesn't fit in there anywhere unless you're going to call it a C diminished with a major 7, which isn't the chord we tend to use. But here it becomes a full diminished, because when the melody resolves downward, you get this. So if you're an arranger, you go through and you decide what's the primary harmony, or what harmony can we use? All right, so now let me just play like I'm an arranger, and I'm going to pull up something here. I got all these things out. Now, of course, I can't find them. Nope, not that. Yeah, one of the problems with this is just the different kind of media that you have to use. That's one I wanted. So here's one. I don't know if if I can maybe blow that up by zooming in. I'm going to zoom in again. Maybe I'll do it again. Now, I've just entered Irving Berlin's melody into a, and if I think I can play this and you'll hear it because I had a program finale, so you hear it. It's just going to play a string section playing it. And that's as far as I wrote down. If you're going to do the same thing in the women's key, you might choose the key of G. And it might look like this. Same melody, but if I were doing that for women, I would probably start off like that. Now, I'm going to think like an arranger. I go back to that. I say, okay, this looks like tonic harmony. What might I do? Well, generally our bass dwells on roots and fifths. So I might just say, let's keep the bass on the root of the chord here. And I might say, not very interesting, right? Second melody measure also has tonic harmony, so C major. So I might say, I'm just doing something totally boring here. I'm not trying to be fancy at all. And then that third measure, well, that's that dissonant chord. But since it goes down to something that looks full diminished, we could do that, or we could say, well, heck, if it weren't for that C there, this would be a B major chord. Kind of misspelled because it's got an E flat in it instead of a D sharp, but who cares? So I might say, I'm just gonna, whoops, I wrote A's instead of C's. Sorry about that. I went wrong. By the way, you would think as an accomplished major, I never make lump. That you would be totally, totally wrong. So I'm going to do that. And now let's make it go to the B line here. And I missed. And the same thing here. All right. Do I have the beginning of arranging? All right, I do. Success. I've arranged two parts. A lot of times arrangers do the lead and do the bass first. I mean, why not? They're generally roots and fifths. I'm going to keep looking. I'm going to go just a little further. This looks like what we call dominant harmony. This is almost like we're in the key of C. It's all like almost like a G seventh chord, except interestingly enough, there's no G in it, but still looks like that. So it sounds G-ish to me. I might write G is my bass note here. And then this is also G, but look, the lead comes down. If that's going to be a G, it's going to have to be that G ninth. So, okay, well, we've got that incomplete ninth chord. So if I'm forced off the root, let's take the fifth of G, which is D. I don't know. I'm going to put a D there and back. All right, here we go. All right, so you see, I've got the beginnings there. This first measure, a lot of arranging is just fill in the blanks, do the obvious thing. Now, arranging isn't always obvious, but sometimes it is. And when it is, you smile and you look up to God and say, thank you, God. That was pretty easy. This is pretty easy because we're just missing a fifth. All right, nice. We're missing a third. Well, the tenor needs to take it. And what is that middle chord? Sounds pretty good. Now you might say, well, why did I allow that added ninth? I didn't have to. I could have said, well, that could be harmonized by D. It could be a G chord. How about a G7 there? So I could make it a G7. And G needs a seventh in it, which would be F. And now it goes. And you might listen to that and think, yeah, it works. That's a chord, but it isn't. It pulls your ear, doesn't it? It kind of sounds, oh, that's a little too much. It's a little too busy for that measure. I think we won't do that. So let's go back to the simple way. Baritone has to get out of the way of the lead. That's what baritone does. The lead comes down to the G. The baritone needs to get out of the way. Let's see, is that going to work? Tenor has got to be on the third. That's the E. Well, let's see. Lead goes down. We can take two routes here. We can take the divorced tenor to fill out the chord. Okay, we could have done that. All right. Or you could have said, well, let's don't take divorced tenor. Let's have the root. But now you're forcing the baritone off of his. So either one of those is an acceptable choice. One happy thing about arranging is that lots of times there are just multiple ways you can go about something. And as a arranger, being the artist, you figure out which one's best. All right. So I can keep going. Let me go one more. Let's worry about this thing that I'm thinking should be like a B chord. Well, if it's a B chord, it needs a fifth, which is an F sharp. And a B chord has a third, which is a D sharp. And let's see what we have here. Sounds pretty good. Now, a barbershop instinct might be, well, that triad is a little rich, a little stunning for a word like roses. It might be harmonized as a seventh chord because after all, it goes to a seventh chord with the lead going there. All right. So we could make it a seventh chord. We're going to make it a seventh chord. Let's do that thing where we take the second inversion. That is the bass seventh. So we move the bass up. F sharp. What is the seventh of a B? Well, it's an A. So I need to move this guy up to. All right. All right, and we keep going. So you kind of see how barbershop arranging can go. You decide what the primary harmony of a measure is, and you just start writing something. A lot of times the arranger will start writing a bass line. Now, let me pull up, I can keep going with this, but I want to get on with other things. And I want to just take, I went ahead and made an arrangement of that. Let's see if this is it. And I actually prepared for this class by doing something. So I took that, I fancied it up a little bit, and I got all the way to where that measure 10 begins. And here's what I wrote down, just doing exactly the process that you just watched me do. All right, so just to make a couple of observations about that, you notice I went away from this seventh, which by the way, I wrote upside down, didn't I? I went ahead and let the bass take the third. So this is the first inversion, tenor on the fifth, them both coming down. And that's fine, just being fancy. I got rid of this boring bass part where it just goes across for 6 notes. Arrangers tend to like to make the bass melodic as much as possible. bass should be interesting and almost like a melody. So it's more fun if the bass can go da 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 than just da 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 da. You know, so okay, this makes it a little more fun for the bass. By the way, if you double something in a major triad, it's either the root or the fifth. Here you see doubled fifths here, except I think I goofed up with something there. Probably should have done. I do have a double fifth. Okay, so anyway, you see the process. And now this was that kind of G7 thing. We took the second inversion with the bass fifth. And what's that chord in the middle? Well, that is the D minor seventh. So that's another chord right out of our repertoire, the minor seventh, D minor seventh. And that relates to G very easily. And so it all fits. It goes back to the G7 in another inversion. And now here's the G again. This is that G incomplete ninth that you could call a minor sixth, or you could call a half diminished. But in this context, it would be silly to do that because it's got G7 written all over it. So this is a G ninth chord. And then what happens here? The bass just descends a half. And what do? We make a what's called flat two, flat Roman numeral 2, D flat 7. And now if you analyze that thing, you'll see that's our half diminished incomplete dominant seventh minor sixth all over again, which just shows how often Barbershop uses that. I realize I'm heading for an A chord, heading for an A7. This functions like a Roman numeral 3 of some type, actually tenor on the root. So that's a 3, if you look at it, half diminished 7, E, G, B flat. That's the diminished part of it. And there's the 7th. So that half diminished 7th leads us around the circle of fifths, so to speak. Okay, so that gives you a little inkling into how a barbershop arranger might go about actually arranging something. Okay, put questions in the, if you have them, burning questions, and let me know, Tanya, if there's anything there. Otherwise, I'll fold up these files and pull out something else. So, okay, going, gone. So let me suppress those. And we'll say, sure, we'll say goodbye to Irving for just a little while. And now I want to talk just a little bit about construction. Actually, let me just stop the share and I want to look at your faces for just a minute here. And let's talk about some of the other decisions that an arranger has to make. So there you've seen a little bit of chord vocabulary, a little bit of the actual process of going through and harmonizing something. But if you're actually going to arrange that song, you notice I skipped the verse. I went right for the chorus. I would have to say, well, do I want to use that composer's verse? Sometimes arrangers use the composer's verse. And sometimes it's an obscure song. Everybody knows the chorus and nobody knows the verse. And maybe the verse actually is pretty lousy in the arranger's opinion. So the arranger might say, I don't want to use that at all. I like the song, I like the chorus, but I don't want to use that verse. In which case the arranger might write a verse, or he or she might write an introduction that leads into a chorus. And then there might be other decisions. Maybe you want more than one chorus. Does it go back and repeat the chorus? If so, does it repeat the whole chorus? Or does it repeat half the chorus? Or maybe it repeats the whole chorus and there's even a little interlude that is between your first and second chorus. There's more composing that arrangers have to do. So a lot of arranging can be composing. You say, well, what do I want this to do? Most arrangers sit down with and kind of map the thing out. Before even really getting started on serious work, you might say, okay, I'm going to use the composer's verse. Okay, it's a pretty good verse. It's going to have a chorus. I'm going to repeat the chorus. Maybe repeat the, I'm going to have an interlude. I'm going to write an interlude. And then it's got to have an ending. I have to write a tag, some sort of coda. It may be an extended tag. So there's more writing to do there. Or it may be the arranger has in mind a medley. I've got two songs that go together. I want to somehow fit them together. Do I have to write an introduction that ties them together? Do I have to write an interlude that goes in between them or connecting material? How is it going to wrap up? Maybe the arranger may choose to have some kind of symmetry between the composed introduction and the composed ending. So there's just millions and millions of decisions that an arranger can make.
David?
Yes.
One of our, Karen has asked, if the bass should generally be on the root or the fifth, why put them on the third sometimes? Isn't that a weaker note within the chord?
And the answer is yes, and that's a very good point. So when I say generally, I mean generally. Generally, Barbershop has solid voicings, and that means the bass is on the root or the fifth. Why would we choose the bass to be on a seventh or a third sometimes? Well, just out of musical interest, just to make a chord interesting or have a slightly different flavor, or sometimes it's for voice leading. There can be all kinds of reasons why you might make another choice. So generally means generally. Generally the bass, generally you double the root in a triad, but do you always double the root? No, sometimes you double the fifth because it gives the chord a sort of cadential feel or an incomplete feel. You don't want that final feel of the, say, the tonic triad with the root doubled. You might want the incomplete feel of the tonic triad with the fifth double. Sometimes you want a slightly weak or an unstable feeling of a bass third, or sometimes a bass third can give a feeling of reverence, like you're in church. So it depends on what kind of mood the arranger is trying to create. So keep in mind, yes, Barbershop generally follows certain rules, but not always. And it's a good thing it's not always, because that's what gives our music interest. Now, if you had a whole arrangement of nothing but bass thirds and bass sevenths, yeah, you'd listen to that and say, that's not what I'm doing. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Okay. It does. Thank you. We've got another question from Marilyn. Can you describe a little more about voice leading?
Yes. So generally you want voice leading to be natural. You do not want, especially for basses. I don't know how many of your basses out there, but we treat you with kid gloves. Not only because basses really don't like bad voice leading. The only bad voice leading we give to basses is what's called the devil's interval. That was actually in the When I Lost You, the harmonization that had the bass going from the C up to the F sharp. Basses do the devil's interval sometimes, but don't get it any more complicated than that. And if you give them the devil's interval, don't follow that with something else weird, or you'll totally lose the bass. So the bass should kind of sing like a melody. That's the way I feel about it. And most arrangers feel that way. Also tenor. Also, here's another thing. With the lowest and highest part, you most are likely to hear the awkwardness of any funny jumps. If you've got a funny jump, who do you give it to, Barbershop scholars? Yes.
The baritone.
You give it to the baritones. That's their job description. That's what they do. They're good at doing unnatural acts, like singing weird intervals in sequence. But even with baritones, you don't want to make it too weird. So, but if you got to have a funny jump, generally give it to the baritone. So yes, you want the voices to sing very naturally. And those of us who are experienced arrangers know when you get done with the arrangement, you darn well better sing through all four parts. If you don't do that, you're making a big mistake, because you can suddenly realize, oh, it played very nicely on my musical notation software or on my piano keyboard. It's absolutely horrible when you try to sing. So the last check I make is I sing through the parts. And generally, I'll make one or two more tweaks because I think, I don't really want to ask the tenors to do that. Let's make that a little simpler. So yes. Okay, now I could go on. I will share the screen again. I see somebody says, what is voice leading actually? Good question. I know we're all at different places. Voice leading is how well the part sings. So it's whether it has natural intervals that are easy or difficult intervals that are awkward jumps. So voice leading refers to how the part lies horizontally across the page. Yeah? All right, scholars, we're going to move on. I am going to share the screen again. And now we're going to look at some examples. I picked 3 examples. And by the way, Tanya, keep me honest on time. Do we have 35 minutes to go or what is it? Is that true?
Yeah, we've got 35 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, good.
But frankly, you can go on all night if you'd like to.
That might not be popular with everybody, but okay. So I'm going to pull up an arrangement, a good arrangement, I think. That's very classic by now. And of course, I can't find it. There's the sound bite. Okay. This is an arrangement several years old by well-known barbershop arranger named J. Lombardo. I'm sure Jay has been over there in England. And it is the classic song, Sweet Adeline. This is a song before there was organized barbershop. It was associated with the barbershop style. Why was it? Because it had this call and echo thing in the chorus. And you have to go down to get to the chorus or refrain. It's got this lead out, Sweet Adeline, and then the echo, Sweet Adeline, my Adeline, and then the old quartets would do my Adeline. It was what we called an echo chorus. So echo is an example of a barbershop embellishment. So Jay designed this arrangement by, first of all, deciding he was going to use the composer's verse. That verse, In the Evening as I Sit Alone the Dreaming, is written by Harry Armstrong, who composed the song in about 1903. So he uses the verse, and it's a quite long verse. If you look at popular songs at the turn of the 20th century, quite frequently, they had a huge long verse and a pretty short chorus. And this is one of those songs. So all this is verse, 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 verse. And the verse is really good. It has, you know, for the sighing wind and nightingale is singing or breathing only your own sweet name. You wouldn't want to eliminate that. I mean, that's just good stuff. And there's finally is the refrain. And he labels it as a refrain. By the way, arrangers, label the parts of your song as Jay did. There's a verse, see it? You may say, well, any dummy knows that. And my response to that is no, any dummy doesn't know that. I don't know how many times when I've been coaching a good group, quartet or chorus, and I'll say, like, let's go back to the beginning of the chorus. And I look up there to a sea of blank faces. And you've got a bunch of people who have memorized their part, but they don't know that the song has a verse and a chorus. They have no idea. So when I write music, I educate them, and you should all do that too. Write good notation, like identify your clefs. This is a women's arrangement, as you can see. And tell the composer or tell the singer where he or she is in the song. All right. You notice even when he repeated part of the chorus, he wrote reprise. Very informative, very helpful. So what did the arranger decide to do? He said, I'm going to use the composer's verse, big long verse, goes into the refrain, the chorus, lots of nice embellishments. And then, are we going to end there? No. Key change, up a half step. You were in E flat, you're now in E natural. It does that by doing a standard modulation. He hits a B7 chord, B7 goes to E. If you look at that, if you unravel that, it's a B7 chord. There's the root. And, sorry, I guess the root's right there. Notice that the lead holds over from an E flat to a D sharp. And that's because J.G. Lombardo couldn't stand to see a B7 chord written with an E flat as the third. It would be misspelled. It's got to be a D sharp. So he wrote that. I would probably write leads. It's the same note, little note, but I would probably do exactly what he did right there. Then it goes into E natural, up a half. You'll notice there's a change of melody. The melody is Sweet Adeline, but he goes, Sweet Adeline. Sorry, my voice cracked there. It's early in the day. My Adeline. Those are all melody changes. So he changed the melody, freedom with the song the second time through. And then heading up to a big tag. Tenor kind of takes a melodic part here, high. Now, I'm going to play you a performance of this arrangement. There's a few perfunctory changes they made, including that last little echo. But you can see what the construction is. The construction is verse, chorus, key change, and then another half chorus. This is a quartet called Jubilation. They're on stage right after they were crowned Queens of Harmony in Sweet Adelines. I'm going to keep the music big and the video small, so hopefully you can see everything here. And so they're standing on stage with their crowns and roses in their hands, singing as newly crowned champions. Great arrangement, great performance.
In the evening, as I sit alone, a-dreaming of days gone by, love, to me so dear. There's a picture that in fancy oft appearing brings back the time, love, when you were near. It is then I wonder where you are, my darling, and if your heart to me is still the same. For the sighing wind and nightingale a-singing are breathing only your own sweet name. Sweet Adeline, sweet Adeline, my Adeline. At night, dear heart, at night, dear heart, for you I pine. In all my dreams, your fair face beams. You're the flower of my heart, sweet Adeline, Adeline, sweet Adeline, Adeline, my Adeline. You're the flower of our hearts, sweet Adeline, sweet Adeline.
Okay, so this is just full of barbershop isms. You notice it lands. We could do a chord analysis, and every chord in here is one of those chords we talked about at the beginning, just about. There's just a tonic chord. You go into E natural, and there's E natural major chord in the 10th position, root, 5th, root, double, 3rd. Barbershop embellishments all over the place. First of all, the echo Adeline, the big swipe here on Adeline. Going into, let's see, there's one thing I wanted to point out. Here's a little barbershop pathology. Barbershop is full of accidentals. So here's here back in E flat. Here's the E flat 7th chord with root, I'm sorry, 5th, root, 3rd, or 7th on top. Here, it's going into what I'd call Roman numeral 2 harmony. This is 2-7, Roman numeral 2-7, because it's a F7 chord in the 2nd inversion. So with the C on the bottom. And you notice it's coming right off of this C7, okay? Root, 3rd, 5th, 7th, all right? But you notice the third requires an accidental. Barbershop arrangers will almost always put in that courtesy accidental when it reverts back to the flatted E going across the measure bar. And that's because barbershop is so full of these little chromatics. You know, but old time barbershoppers called these things minors. They didn't mean minor like a minor chord. In the old barbershop days, a minor was any altered chord, anything that required an accidental. So when it encounters these minors in this sense, it's always helpful to remind the singer to, now you got to go back down to just the ordinary scale tone. So this is just full of barbershop. I can't imagine a better example of just classic barbershop voiced in classic, voicings. And you notice here on this add a line, somebody was asking about what about weak voicings? Well, look at this. It goes up, it ends up on the tonic chord again, the E, but now it's bass third, double fifth. Why bass third? Well, look at that nice melodic bass line. Just right up, upward motion like that is perfect. It's melodic. So it's worth having an unstable chord for just one quarter note to just allow for that excellent, beautiful voice lead. Okay. And then I guess I should say something about the opening. A great opening where you start off with solo, it fits the lyric. You're sitting alone dreaming. Days gone by, the little duet evokes the emotion. And then it slowly goes back to 4-part harmony when this line begins. Then I wonder where you are, my darling, making contrast to my vision of dreaming to, okay, now I'm wondering where you are at the moment. So this is really good painting, use of the musical palette by the arranger to create mood and emotion in his choice of embellishments. A classic arrangement couldn't be done any better, in my opinion. That's just perfect barbershop. Okay, if there's any comments about that, you're welcome. Otherwise, I am welcome to do that in the chat. I'm going to go on to another example. Let me pull that up. This is an arrangement of Always, another Irving Berlin song, by the way. And it will be as performed by Men's Quartet called Michigan Jake. So I'm going to get rid of this, get rid of this. I'm going to pull this video over where it's pretty small. Load this up, so hopefully you'll be able to see it. Make it nice and big. All right. Many of you probably know the Irving Berlin song, Always. Before we see a performance of it, let's see what choices the arranger, in this case, arrangers, made. Starts with a verse. That's Irving Berlin's verse. They decided, yes, the composer wrote a good verse. Let's use it. And there's that classic chorus. I'll be loving you always. Gets done with the chorus. This goes back to a refrain of the chorus. It's not labeled, should be. Days may not be fair. See that? Well, no, I'm sorry. That's still a continuation of the first verse. I'm not in the right place. Here's where it says days may not be fair again. So this is the end of the chorus, and the arrangers decided to repeat half of the chorus again. Now you notice it was an A flat. When you hear this, you're going to say that sounds very much like it's in D flat, and it is. That's the melody in D flat. It really changes to D flat there, but it goes back to A flat so quickly, like there, that the arrangers decided not to notate it. So they just created D flat with accidentals. And then it does the last half of the chorus again, going into a not very long tag, but with some really neat embellishments that I think you're going to love. So let's listen to this performance.
Dreams will all come true, growing old with you, and time will fly, caring each day more than the day before, till spring rolls by, rolls by. Then when the springtime has gone, then will my love linger, linger on. I'll be loving you always, with a love that's true, always, always. When the things you plan seem to need a helping hand, I will understand always, always. Days may not be fair, always. That's when I'll be there, always. Not for just an hour, not for just a day, not for just a year, but always, always. Days may not be fair, always, always. That's when I'll be there, always. Not for just an hour, not for just a day, not for just a year, but always, always,
All right, that's about as elegant as an arrangement can get, in my opinion. I just can't imagine a better arranger doing a better job than that. It's perfect from beginning to end. All of the embellishments fit. I love the way it wraps up with these big swipes here. Just create a lot of tension and drama and exclamation, and then the way it winds down here and ends very simply. You notice this open voicing. This is what we call open voicing, 2-octave spread, something you would tend to do more for a men's arrangement than you would for a women's arrangement. So it's root, fifth, third, root, okay, on that A flat triad. Just this penultimate chord right here, this is our friend that we can never decide what it is. You notice it's got the D flat, you know, that F flat, B flat, and A flat. So that's our friend that in this inversion, you might call it the D flat minor sixth, right? So, and if you call the the B flat, the root, it would become the half diminished. All right. And if you inserted a G flat in there, you could say it's the incomplete ninth, but those last two possibilities wouldn't be very practical in this context. So you'd probably say, yeah, this is probably the root right here. But, you know, again, probably depends on, I don't know, where you were born or something. Doesn't matter. Sounds good. Doesn't matter what you call it. Okay, let's go back and just take a few more observations here. We'll go on to something else. I mean, that's just perfect. Look at all these great embellishments, the way it's dreams will all come true. The other three parts, dreams will all come true, growing old with you. Just those wonderful little simple embellishments. Time will fly, bass echo, time will fly. And then after doing it kind of fancy, the arranger gives us kind of a vanilla version, carrying each day more than the day before. So spring rolls by. And then I told you that barbershoppers love harmonic richness. This song is perfect for that because Irving Berlin songs often modulate. They modulate without any key change being written. When it goes, time goes by, then when the springtime is gone, if you look at that, it's got C minor written all the time. So it's Roman numeral 3 minor. So this really is C minor-ish, even though we're in the key of A flat. A lot of times Irving Berlin writes things that modulate major and minor thirds, but doesn't write that as a key change in the music. And the reason he doesn't is because it goes back very quickly. So there's that E minor. E minor has as its dominant this seventh chord right here, G7. So it's Roman numeral 7, going back to our nomenclature, which is the dominant of this E minor thing or C minor thing. And then this chord carries us right back to the key of A flat. All right. And then Irving Berlin does it again. I'll be loving you always with the love that's true, always, when the things you plan need a helping hand. Look at that. Now we're in the key of C major, and it sits there for a while. I will understand that's the dominant of C major, except it's that incomplete ninth thing. And then C major, always. Whoops. But Irving Berlin, not the arranger, gets us back to A flat. Barbershoppers love that kind of harmonic richness, that kind of interest that gives you a chance for chord variety. That's what we love. We love harmonic richness, probably more than any other thing. Okay. Now there's one other trick that this is one of the slickest things I've ever heard. I always heard this thing. I remember hearing this quartet is Michigan Jake, hearing them sing that. And when it goes into that second chorus where the bass goes, days may not be fair, I realized, well, shoot, that made a key change. That's what songs often do. Goes up a fourth, goes from A flat. You're now in D flat. But I never could get, wait a minute, how did it get back? How to get back to A flat? Well, the song goes, if you recall, at this point, this is where the first time through, it went to Roman numeral 3 right here on That's When I'll Be There. So when A flat to C, all right, and actually C7. This one is in D flat, and it goes to that C. I'm sorry, that's not a C chord. That's this chord. It's F. All right. And so somehow that leads you to believe that you're back in the key of A flat, and you really don't hear the key change. You don't hear the key change that carries you back to the key you were in. So this right here, that piece of writing going right here into that is one of the slickest things I've ever seen in barbershop. And when you hear it, you don't notice it. It just sounds natural. It sounds seamless, which is the way good arranging sounds. And then the tag's perfect. Would you want a big, loud, screaming tag on a song like this? No, I don't think so. This is exactly what you want. Feels right, sets the sound down perfectly. Okay? Great arrangement of Irving Berlin's always, and a great performance by Michigan Jake. Now we have time for one more. I will proceed. If there are any burning issues, now would be a good time to bring them up. We're going to do a mixed arrangement. This is a quartet called Double Date. singing an arrangement by a great arranger by the name of Theo Hicks. And you will notice that the arranger has chosen to write the arrangement using the male clefs, but it sits very high on the male clefs. So you notice how that thing rides high, and that's because it's about a minor third up from where it would be if it was a men's arrangement, and about a minor third down from where it would be if it's a women's arrangement. Okay, and it turns out perfectly. Let's think about the form. So this thing, and by the way, Theo, I should give him my lecture, didn't label the parts. This is a verse to one of the songs, and this song is a medley. This is a verse to the first song called You Are My Lucky Star. And that verse ends right here, and here's where the first chorus begins. That's a song called You Are My Lucky Star. Goes all the way through that chorus. This is a little connecting material right here. He probably wrote that. This is another song. You were meant for me, I was meant for you. Nature patterned you, and when she was done, you were all sweet things rolled into one. A lot of you have seen, a lot of us have heard arrangements of just that song. It ends the second song, so it goes all the way through the chorus of the second song. And then it does this bookending thing. It goes back to Lucky Star, to the lyrics, and it tags it out. Now, again, I think there are a few perfunctory changes in the performance from the arrangement, but let's listen to the arrangement and follow it on paper. So here we go. This is double date.
Now look at what you've just done to me. Now it's too late to pretend. I tried to play smart, but right from the start, I hoped this was how it would end. I told myself it was ridiculous. I'm silly, adolescent, more. I argued the cost, I argued and lost. And now of one thing I am sure. You are my lucky star. I saw you from afar. Two lovely eyes at me, they were gleaming, they were beaming. I was starstruck. You're my darling, all my lucky charms. I'm so very lucky in your loving arms. You've opened heaven's portal here for this poor mortal. You are my lucky star. Life was a song, you came along. I've laid awake the whole night through. But if I but dare to think you cared, this is what I'd say to you. You were meant for me, I was meant for you. I was meant for you. the sweet things rolled up in one. My lucky star that never lets me set me free, for I'm content. The angels must have sent you and they meant you just for me. You, my darling, are my lucky star. Lucky star. You're my star.
Okay, great arrangement. Darn good performance. You notice the tessitura all the way through. You notice the creativity of the arrangement. I especially like when he is in You Were Meant for Me, but then he uses these echo lyrics that evoke lucky star. So that's something arrangers try to do. They come up with all the things they can do that tie this thing together so it's cohesive. So there's just a little bit of what, the popular word these days is mashup. You hear it on these TV things. I've never understood the difference between a mashup and a medley, but Deke Sharon tried to tell me one time that it's a mashup, kind of combines the songs, so that it's contrapunctual as opposed to just going from one to the other. So I guess if you take that definition, there's a little bit of mashup right there when your plaintive melody and the echo goes, repeats the lucky star. Great voicings, great chords. This chord right here is what we call the Chinese seventh. That's the seventh with the root on top. So that note up there is the root. Seventh. Third is the D natural. And fifth is that F. So yeah, B flat, Chinese seventh. All kinds of great harmonies in this thing. And let me go back and just point out something at the top here. What was I going to say? I love the way this goes. Argued and lost. I argued the cost, I argued and lost. And now of one thing I'm sure. And of course, the quartet put a fermata there. So there should be a double line there because that really delineates going into You Are My Lucky Star. Now you notice here, there's quite a bit of lead over tenor in this arrangement. That happens quite a bit, particularly with these vocalists, because it just works quite well for them. A lead over tenor is fairly common in barbershop, maybe not to this extent, but barbershop keeps track of that by always making the lead notes stems down, tenor notes stems up. That's something people getting into barbershop kind of have to get used to. Also, barbershop always likes to write music on two clefs. People coming in from the choral world, that takes you a little bit by surprise. You say, well, why not have them on four clefs? When barbershoppers see the music on four clefs, it can be very confusing to them. And the reason is because barbershoppers like to read not just horizontally, but vertically. Very important that you see not just what your part does, but what all the parts do. And that's a lot easier to take in when you've got things stacked into two clefs. Now, of course, it makes things look messy at times, like that line right there looks a bit messy. You notice all those X's, which means the lead is crossing over the tenor. So it can make the music look a little messy, but we're willing to put up with that messiness just to have, good measures like this, where it's very clear what's going on and the person reading the bass can see clearly what's happening up in the treble clef. Okay. So I think this gets us close to being at the end of my time. So maybe I will stop the share and just ask if you have any questions. Maybe we have a minute or two we can take for that. If anybody would like to ask, you can just maybe unmute yourself and ask out loud. How about that?
I do have a question.
Yes.
I'm Haley Thurston, and I was wondering what I have never heard of this. What is it? You mentioned the Chinese seventh.
Yeah,
What in the world is that?
it's exactly that chord that I just pointed out. It's got the root on the top, the seventh right under. It's a particular voicing of a seventh chord. Let me just go back to that very briefly for just a moment here. The Chinese seventh there's one right there. All right. So if you look at that, you'll decide that's an A flat.
David, Haley is visually impaired.
blind.
Haley's blind, so she wouldn't be able to see it on the music.
Oh, okay. So imagine a seventh chord. Let's suppose it was a C7, Haley, and the C is on top. And the B flat of the C7 chord is right underneath it. So you've got that interval of a major second. And then down is the third, which is the E. And then the next thing down is the fifth, which is the G. So it's in second inversion. It's a special example of second inversion.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Gotcha.
It's that particular inversion. Now, if we were to label inversions, that doesn't tell the whole story, which may be why we tend not to label inversions so much in barbershop. You know, if you call that, I don't know what you'd call it. I have no idea how that would be labeled in any kind of music. In barbershop, we just call it the Chinese seventh, special voicing of the seventh chord. And if you ask why that, it may be because those top two notes with that second, if you play chopsticks on the piano, that's the the interval you start off with. So maybe that's why they started calling it the Chinese seventh. Anything else?
Can I ask a question?
Please.
I'd like to ask, I'm sure that there are sort of trends in barbershop arranging, and I'm wondering what the most current trendy thing is that's going on in arranging in barbershop.
Oh, that's a great question. Not so easy to answer succinctly, but I would say one thing, Tony Ann, is that one thing that's happening is a wider variety of songs to choose to arrange. So you're going to hear songs nowadays that come from popular music that's fairly recent, and certainly popular music that goes back 2 and 3 decades. And really, people say, well, that's a change of barbershop tradition. In a greater sense, it's not. Barbershoppers have always taken songs of their day and tried to figure out how to barbershop them. They were doing it in 1925. They were doing it in 1870, and they're doing it in 2021. So when barbershop arranger hears a song, they just listen for, is there any harmonic variety here? You know, is there can I hang my hat on any kind of good chord changes that'll make it interesting for barbershoppers to sing? And if the answer to that is yes, they write a barbershop arrangement, and quite frequently it's an arrangement that gets used in a barbershop contest. And, you know, we're just much more open to that, I would say, in recent years than we used to be. I don't know if you heard the most recent champion in the Barbershop Harmony Society is a quartet called Signature. And one of their songs was called Blame It on the Boogie. Now,
Yeah, I did hear that. Beautiful.
I say you wouldn't have heard Blame It on the Boogie even 15 years ago, but it had lots of seventh chords in it. And yeah, it slithered through. So that's certainly one thing.
That's a great answer. I love that. Thank you very much, David. It's been an amazing session.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions, and if there are, please butt in quickly. Can we just unmute ourselves and give David a massive round of applause and thank him for his time for this workshop?
David. Inviting me, pleasure. I think before it's not so easy to teach a subject like this virtually, but you were very patient. I appreciate all the questions and points that you had, and hopefully it's helpful to you in some way.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you get his picture?
Oh, you need a picture?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we need a picture.
Oh, better smile like you understood him now. I think you stunned everybody into silence, David. That was a fabulous session, but yeah, it's just so much to
And
take
should I
in.
come over a little to the left?
Where are you, Hayley? I
Haley,
can't-
your camera's off. If you want to put your camera on, and then we'll see you.
There's a quiz at the end of this course, by the way.
Oh. Here we go.
Okay, are you ready? Steady. One. I've got 2 pages, so this is page whatever. 1, 2, 3. Smile. That's one. Let's go to the next page. Okay, David, you're on this page, so you better smile too, like you enjoyed yourself. Smile. 1, 2, 3. Fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
See all you collective people in another Zoom room soon.
Hey-ho. Go.
Whoever is recording, would they like to start?